The thunder cracked like 1,000 gunshots as Beatrice Dawson frantically tried to save what remained of her homestead, the rain pelting her face with cold fury. The storm had been brewing for hours, darkening the Montana sky into a menacing shade of charcoal before unleashing its wrath upon the land. Her small ranch house, built by her late father's hands just 5 years prior, was no match for the savage winds that had torn half the roof clean off, leaving her possessions at the mercy of the elements. It was 1883, and life in the Western Territories was unforgiving even on the best of days. At 23, Beatrice had been managing alone since her father's passing the previous winter. The neighboring homesteaders had helped when they could, but most had their own struggles to contend with, especially after the harsh winter had claimed so many cattle. "Miss, you there, take cover." A deep voice called out over the howling wind. Beatrice spun around, rain-soaked hair plastered to her face, to find a tall figure on horseback approaching. The stranger dismounted with practiced ease despite the storm, leading his dappled gray stallion toward her. "Your roof is half gone." "You can't stay here," he shouted, coming into clearer view. His face was partially obscured by the wide brim of his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes that seemed to hold their own kind of storm. "I can't leave. Everything I own is here." Beatrice cried back, gesturing helplessly at the house where rain poured through the exposed rafters. She had been trying to salvage what she could, dragging trunks and bedding to the side of the house that still had protection. "Name's Griffin Nash," he said, stepping closer. "I've got a wagon just down the way. We can load what matters most and find shelter." "I don't know you, Mr. Nash," Beatrice replied warily, though the logic of his suggestion was undeniable. Another powerful gust sent a loose piece of wood flying dangerously close to her head, making her decision for her. "I was heading to Silver Creek when the storm hit. Saw your place from the ridge," he explained. "I'm not in the habit of leaving folks to the mercy of nature." There was something in his eyes, a steadiness, a certainty that compelled her trust, or perhaps it was simply that she had no choice. "Beatrice Dawson," she introduced herself, finally accepting his offered hand. "And I would be grateful for your help, Mr. Nash." Together they worked quickly, Griffin bringing his wagon around while Beatrice pointed out what needed saving. First, her father's chest of tools, family photographs, quilts her mother had made, and the small strongbox that contained what little money she had. The wind continued its assault, forcing them to brace against its power as they loaded the wagon. "The livestock?" Griffin asked, shouting to be heard above the storm. "Just 2 horses and some chickens in the coop. The horses are in the stable, it's still intact." Beatrice replied, her clothes now completely sodden and heavy against her skin. Griffin nodded and led the horses out, tethering them to the back of his wagon. The chickens would have to fend for themselves. There was no time or means to transport them safely. As they climbed onto the wagon bench, Griffin turned to Beatrice. "There's a place about 3 miles east, abandoned trapper's cabin, roof solid. We can wait out the storm there." The journey was treacherous, with the wagon wheels sinking into the mud and the rain reducing visibility to mere feet ahead. Griffin handled the reins with a surety that suggested years of experience navigating such conditions. Beatrice sat beside him, clutching the bench with white knuckles, her mind racing between gratitude for his timely appearance and worry over what remained of her home. The trapper's cabin materialized out of the gloom like a mirage, a small, squat structure nestled against a stand of pines that offered some protection from the wind. Griffin helped Beatrice down from the wagon, his strong hands steadying her as her boots sank into the mud. "It's not much, but it's dry," he said, pushing open the door to reveal a Spartan interior, a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with a single chair, and a narrow cot pushed against one wall. "It's perfect," Beatrice replied honestly, relief washing over her as she stepped inside out of the rain. Griffin brought in what they would need for the night, including her bedroll and some provisions from his own packs. He moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to making camp in adverse conditions, quickly starting a fire in the hearth that soon filled the small space with welcome warmth. As Beatrice draped her soaked shawl near the fire to dry, she observed her rescuer more carefully. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with features that spoke of hard living but retained a certain gentleness, particularly when he smiled, as he did now, catching her gaze. "Should be cozy enough for the night," Griffin said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Tomorrow we can see what's left of your place." "Why were you traveling in such weather, Mr. Nash?" Beatrice asked, accepting a cup of coffee he had brewed over the fire. Griffin settled onto the floor, stretching his long legs toward the hearth. "I've been working cattle drives up north, was heading to Silver Creek for a possible ranch hand position at the Harrington spread. You know it," Beatrice nodded. "Mr. Harrington stops by sometimes to trade." "He's fair, from what I've heard." A comfortable silence fell between them as they listened to the rain drumming on the roof and the occasional crack of thunder. Despite the circumstances, Beatrice found herself relaxing in Griffin's presence. There was something reassuring about his calm demeanor, his matter-of-fact approach to their predicament. "How long have you been on your own, Miss Dawson?" Griffin asked after a while, his voice softer now that they didn't have to compete with the storm outside. "Almost a year. My father built our place after my mother passed. It was just the two of us until pneumonia took him last winter." Beatrice looked down at her hands, remembering the countless hours they had spent working the land together. "I've managed well enough, but storms like this—" "No one manages well against nature's fury," Griffin said. "Not alone, anyway." His words held no judgment, only understanding, and Beatrice felt a surprising comfort in that. As night deepened, the storm showed no signs of abating. Griffin insisted Beatrice take the cot while he made do with his bedroll on the floor near the fire. Despite her protests, he was adamant. "You've had enough hardship today without adding a poor night's sleep," he said with finality. Lying on the narrow cot, listening to the rain and the occasional shift of Griffin tending the fire, Beatrice found herself wondering about the strange twists of fate that had brought this stranger into her life on this of all nights. Morning arrived with an eerie stillness, the storm having blown itself out sometime during the night. Beatrice awakened to find Griffin already up, heating coffee and preparing a simple breakfast from his provisions. "Thought you might be hungry," he said when he noticed her stirring. "We should head back soon, assess the damage in daylight." The ride back to her homestead was silent, both of them bracing for what they might find. As they crested the final hill, Beatrice's heart sank. The damage was worse than she had feared. Nearly 2/3 of the roof was gone, and one wall had partially collapsed under the force of the wind. "I'm sorry," Griffin said quietly beside her, "but it can be rebuilt." Beatrice fought back tears. "I don't have the means for that kind of repair, not now with winter coming." They spent the day salvaging what they could. The stable had weathered the storm better than the house, providing temporary shelter for her recovered possessions. The chickens, miraculously, had survived in their coop, though they seemed rather indignant about the whole affair. As evening approached, Beatrice stood in what remained of her kitchen, reality settling heavily upon her shoulders. "I suppose I'll have to find lodging in town until I can figure something out," she said, more to herself than to Griffin. "Or," Griffin offered, seeming to choose his words carefully, "you could camp here on your own land, at least for tonight." "Camp?" Beatrice looked around at the ruined house. "Where exactly?" Griffin gestured toward the clearing beside the house. "We've got bedrolls, provisions." "The storm took your roof," he said, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun, "but we'll sleep under the stars and call it heaven tonight." There was something in his expression, part kindness, part something else she couldn't quite name, that stirred something within Beatrice. She found herself nodding, a small smile forming despite the circumstances. That night, they made camp beside the ruins of her home. Griffin built a fire and prepared a simple meal from his supplies and what they had salvaged from her pantry. Sitting across the flames from him, Beatrice was struck by how comfortable his presence felt, as if they had known each other far longer than a single day. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Nash," she said as they ate. "How does a man learn to handle himself so well in a crisis?" Griffin's smile was tinged with something distant. "Life teaches hard lessons early sometimes. Lost my folks to fever when I was 16. Been making my way ever since cattle drives, ranch work, whatever honest labor I could find." "And yet you stopped to help a stranger in a storm," Beatrice observed. "Wouldn't call it a burden to help someone like you, Miss Dawson," Griffin replied, his eyes meeting hers across the fire with an intensity that caused her to look away, suddenly self-conscious. As darkness fell completely, the sky cleared to reveal a spectacular canopy of stars, countless pinpricks of light against the vast blackness. They laid their bedrolls on either side of the dying fire, a respectful distance between them. "He was right, you know," Beatrice said softly, gazing upward. "Who was?" Griffin asked, turning his head toward her. "My father. He always said that sometimes we focus so much on what protects us that we forget to look up and see what's truly there." She gestured toward the brilliant display above. "I haven't looked up in a long time." Griffin was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes it takes losing something to see what remains." Their conversation drifted into the night, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes, their struggles. There was an ease between them that defied their brief acquaintance, as if the stars themselves had orchestrated their meeting. In the days that followed, Griffin postponed his journey to Silver Creek, instead helping Beatrice assess what would be needed to repair her home. They made daily trips into town for supplies, Beatrice using the modest funds she had been saving to purchase lumber and nails. "You don't have to stay," she told him on the third day as they worked side by side, clearing debris. "I'm sure Mr. Harrington is expecting you." Griffin paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sent word that I'd be delayed. Besides, I wouldn't feel right leaving you with all this." He gestured at the half-dismantled wall they were preparing to rebuild. "Unless you're tired of my company, Miss Dawson." "Beatrice," she corrected him with a smile. "And no, I'm not tired of your company, far from it." Word of Beatrice's misfortune spread through the surrounding homesteads, and soon others came to lend a hand. The Millers brought additional tools and their 2 strong sons. The widow Johnson arrived with food to feed the workers. Even Mr. Harrington himself made an appearance, bringing lumber from his own stores and 3 of his ranch hands to help with the heavy lifting. "Heard you were delayed helping a neighbor in need," Harrington said to Griffin as they worked together on the frame for a new roof. "That's the kind of man I want working for me." Griffin glanced over at Beatrice, who was directing the placement of new support beams. "Some things are worth the delay," he replied, a warmth in his voice that didn't escape Harrington's notice. With so many hands helping, progress was swift. Within a week, the structure was sound again, with new walls and a sturdy roof that promised to withstand the next storm. Throughout it all, Griffin remained, working longer hours than anyone, his skill with carpentry revealing yet another facet of his capabilities. Each evening, regardless of the progress on the house, they would sit outside beneath the stars, continuing their tradition from that first night. Sometimes they were joined by those who had stayed late to help, but often it was just the 2 of them, their conversations growing deeper, more personal with each passing day. "Will you still go to work for Mr. Harrington once this is done?" Beatrice asked one night, trying to keep her tone casual despite the weight the answer held for her. Griffin was silent for a long moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "I've been thinking about that," he finally said. "Harrington offered me the job outright when he was here. Said I could start whenever I was ready." "That's wonderful," Beatrice said, ignoring the twinge of disappointment that accompanied her words. "His ranch is only a few hours' ride from here. You could visit, if you wanted to." Griffin looked up at her then, the firelight casting shadows across his features. "I've been drifting a long time, Beatrice, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, but being here working alongside you, helping rebuild something that matters, it feels different." Beatrice's heart quickened at his words, at the implication behind them. "Different how? Like maybe I've been looking for something without knowing what it was," he said quietly. "Until now." The air between them seemed charged with possibility, with unspoken feelings that had been growing steadily since that stormy night. Before Beatrice could respond, however, they were interrupted by the arrival of the Miller boys, bringing additional supplies for the next day's work. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that could no longer be ignored. The house was nearly complete when a letter arrived from Silver Creek. Harrington needed an answer about the job. Another qualified man had expressed interest, and he couldn't hold the position open indefinitely. Griffin had until the end of the week to decide. "You should take it," Beatrice told him that evening as they sat on the newly built porch steps. "It's a good opportunity, steady work with a fair man." Griffin studied her face in the fading light. "Is that what you want me to do?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning. Beatrice found herself at a crossroads, wanting to be selfless, yet unable to deny her own heart any longer. "What I want," she began hesitantly, "is for you to be happy, Griffin. These past weeks have been. I've never known anyone like you, someone who would stop in a storm for a stranger, who would work alongside me without complaint, who would." She faltered, unsure how to express the depth of her feelings. Griffin reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet certain. "I think I found something here I wasn't expecting, Beatrice, something more valuable than any job." "And what's that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A reason to stay in one place, a home maybe, if you'll have me." The words were simple, but their impact was profound. Beatrice looked into his eyes, seeing reflected there the same emotion that had been growing within her, a love born from shared hardship, mutual respect, and countless conversations beneath starlit skies. "I'd have you," she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "But I wouldn't want you giving up your dreams for me." Griffin smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering against her cheek. "My dream has changed, Beatrice. It used to be finding the next job, the next adventure. Now it's waking up every morning and seeing your face." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, but Beatrice met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged beneath the same stars that had witnessed their growing bond. When they finally parted, Griffin kept her hand in his. "I'll still need work," he said pragmatically, "but there are ranches nearby, or," he paused, seeming to gather courage, "we could build this place up together, make it something more than it was." The idea took root in Beatrice's mind immediately. Her land expanded and improved with Griffin by her side. Not just surviving, but thriving. "That sounds like a dream worth pursuing," she said, squeezing his hand. The following day, Griffin rode to Silver Creek to speak with Harrington in person, explaining his decision to decline the job offer. The older man was disappointed but understanding. "Thought as much when I saw how you looked at that Dawson girl," Harrington said with a knowing smile. "Can't say I blame you. She's got grit, that one. Tell you what, I've got more cattle than my current grazing land can handle. Might be interested in leasing some of your land if you're amenable. Would give you steady income while you build up your own herd." Griffin returned to the homestead with Harrington's proposition, finding Beatrice in the newly repaired kitchen, preparing dinner. "He offered us a business arrangement instead," Griffin explained, unable to keep the excitement from his voice as he outlined Harrington's proposal. "It's a start, Beatrice, a foundation we can build on." "Us," Beatrice repeated, savoring the word, "our foundation." Griffin crossed the room to her, taking both her hands in his. "I know this is fast, we've only known each other a few weeks. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Beatrice Dawson. I think I started falling for you that first night under the stars." "And I love you," Beatrice replied, the words coming easily, naturally. "Perhaps it is fast by some standards, but when you know, you know." "My father always said that. Your father sounds like a wise man," Griffin said with a smile. "I wish I could have met him." "He would have liked you," Beatrice assured him. "Anyone who would stop to help a stranger in a storm would have earned his respect immediately." Their courtship proceeded swiftly after that, their shared experiences having already forged a bond deeper than many couples who had known each other for years. They were married in the small church in Silver Creek, just as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, with the community that had helped rebuild Beatrice's home gathering to celebrate their union. The minister, a kindly older man named Reverend Hopkins, spoke of foundations built on solid ground, of partnerships that could withstand any storm. Beatrice, in a simple cream-colored dress that had belonged to her mother, and Griffin, in a new suit that Mr. Harrington had insisted on providing as a wedding gift, exchanged vows beneath a canopy of wildflowers gathered by the Johnson children. "I promise to be your shelter in every storm," Griffin vowed, his voice steady and sure. "And I promise to remind you to look up at the stars, even on the darkest nights," Beatrice responded, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. Their first year together brought challenges, as all new beginnings do. The winter was harsh, testing the strength of their repairs and their resolve, but it also brought long evenings by the fire, planning for the future, dreaming of what their land could become. Spring arrived with renewed promise. The leasing arrangement with Harrington provided stability while Griffin and Beatrice worked to expand their own operations. They added more chickens, planted a larger garden, and purchased a small herd of cattle with the money they had carefully saved. On warm nights, no matter how tired they were from the day's labor, they maintained their tradition of sitting beneath the stars together. Sometimes they talked of practical matters, which fields to plant, when to sell the calves, but often they simply enjoyed each other's company, marveling at how a devastating storm had ultimately brought them the greatest blessing of their lives. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the storm hadn't taken the roof?" Beatrice asked one evening, her head resting on Griffin's shoulder as they sat on a quilt spread on the ground. "I'd like to think we would have found each other anyway," Griffin replied, his arm tightening around her. "Maybe I would have stopped for water or asked directions. But it might not have been the same," Beatrice mused. "We might have exchanged pleasantries and gone our separate ways." "I don't believe that," Griffin said firmly. "Some things are meant to be, storm or no storm, but I'm grateful for it all the same. It gave me the chance to see who you truly are, right from the start." As their second anniversary approached, Beatrice had news to share. Waiting for a particularly clear night, she led Griffin to their special spot beside the house. "I have something for you," she said, handing him a small package wrapped in brown paper. Griffin unwrapped it carefully to reveal a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties. He looked at them in confusion for a moment before understanding dawned, his expression transforming into one of wonder and joy. "Beatrice, are you saying?" She nodded, her smile radiant in the moonlight. "Come spring, there will be 3 of us to look at the stars." Griffin gathered her in his arms, laughing and crying all at once. "I never imagined I could be this happy," he whispered against her hair. "When I was drifting from place to place, I thought adventure was what I needed, but it was home all along. You're my home, Beatrice." "And you're mine," she replied, secure in his embrace. "Our child will know nothing but love and stability, the kind I had with my parents, the kind you deserve to have longer than you did." The baby, a boy they named Thomas after Beatrice's father, was born on a clear spring morning. He had Griffin's dark hair and Beatrice's determined spirit, crying lustily as Dr. Matthews placed him in his mother's arms. "He's perfect," Griffin whispered, perched on the edge of the bed, one arm around Beatrice as they marveled at their son. "Absolutely perfect." Life settled into a new rhythm with Thomas's arrival. The homestead continued to prosper under their joint efforts, with Griffin's carpentry skills and Beatrice's knowledge of the land complementing each other perfectly. They added onto the house, building a proper bedroom for Thomas and expanding the kitchen to accommodate Beatrice's growing talent for preserving and baking, which had begun to earn extra income at the town's weekly market. When Thomas was old enough to stay awake past sunset, they began including him in their stargazing tradition. Griffin would point out constellations, making up stories about each one that made Beatrice laugh and Thomas's eyes widen with wonder. One day, Griffin told his son, "You'll understand why the stars are so special to your mama and me. They remind us that even when things seem darkest, there's still beauty to be found if you just look up." The years flowed by, marked by the seasons and the milestones of their growing family. A daughter, Lily, joined them 3 years after Thomas, bringing a new kind of joy to their home. The homestead expanded further, with additional livestock and fields under cultivation. What had once been Beatrice's struggle to survive alone had transformed into a thriving family operation, respected throughout the region. On the 10th anniversary of the storm that had brought them together, Griffin surprised Beatrice with a special gift, a small brass telescope he had ordered from back east. "So we can see the stars even closer," he explained as she unwrapped it, her expression one of delighted surprise. "And show the children more of heaven's wonders." That night, with Thomas and Lily tucked safely in bed, Griffin and Beatrice sat on their porch, the telescope positioned to capture the brilliance of the night sky. "You ever regret it?" Beatrice asked softly as Griffin adjusted the instrument. "Staying here instead of continuing your travels," Griffin looked up from the telescope, his expression serious. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "Every morning I wake up beside you, every time I see our children's faces, every evening we spend under these stars, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Even though we've had our share of hardships." Beatrice pressed, thinking of the drought 2 years prior that had threatened their crops, of the illness that had swept through the community last winter, touching their family as well. "Especially then," Griffin replied, taking her hand. "Those are the times when what we've built together matters most. Remember what I told you that first night? The storm took your roof, but we slept under the stars and called it heaven," Beatrice finished, smiling at the memory. "And it still is." Griffin pulled her close, kissing her with the same tenderness he had shown that first time years ago. "To many more years under these stars," he whispered against her lips. "Many more," Beatrice agreed, her heart full as she gazed upward at the endless expanse above, grateful for the storm that had changed the course of her life, bringing her not just shelter, but a love as vast and enduring as the heavens themselves.